Ladies and gentlemen, today I want to discuss Geoffrey Chaucer. Geoffrey Chaucer, a 14th century poet, he tried to communicate one of the greatest role in the English literature, or in other words, we call him as the father of English literature. Is that clear? If we analyze Geoffrey Chaucer, he is equal to Shakespeare so far as his writing is concerned, so far as his characters are concerned. His partner, summoner, parson, knight, and wife of Bath, and rest of the other characters. That plays a significant role. If we study his character, it looks that we are visualizing these characters. We are looking through the vision of our eyes. No doubt, these are not the picture, but we can see through the vision of our mind. In this context, it's quite clear that Geoffrey Chaucer, as I have already pointed out, that he has the greatest characteristic. And what is that? That his character, for instance, I would like to tell you, Hamlet, Shakespeare's Hamlet, Othello, Merchant of Venice, Antonio and Bassanio, King Lear, Macbeth and Lady Macbeth. These all characters are the real character of our life. We can see men like Hamlet today. We can see men like Othello today. So if we try to analyze, that is the character of Geoffrey Chaucer, his characters are the living character. He has given a gallery of pictures in which you can enjoy the different characters. The character of parson, partner, knight, clerk, and rest of the other. But I am of the opinion that Geoffrey Chaucer is a man of humanity. He has milk of humanity in his inner. In spite of the fact that he belonged to the higher state of society, he writes for the court. He writes for the feudal lord. But even then, he is very much sympathetic with his downtrodden common people and things like that. He does not hate his characters. Rather, he loves his character. The instrument, I am of the opinion, the instrument which Geoffrey Chaucer uses, that is the irony, satire. But his satire is gentle, cold, and calculated. In this context, I am of the opinion, I would like to pinpoint the critic of Geoffrey Chaucer. Bowden is trying to observe that his characters, what happened is that he observed He observed that outwardly he wants to praise his character, but inwardly he wants to criticize, he wants to condemn his character. For instance, I would like to give you the example. The character of the sergeant, is that clear, of the law, a man of purely, that of a materialist success. He is a pragmatic, he is a utilitarian. His main job is to earn money, nothing but to earn money. And man as law of justice, that of a spoke so impressively and so pedantically that it looks that he wants to impress others, and definitely can do it. If we try to analyze Geoffrey Chaucer, he is a great painter in which he tried to paint a picture of his society, of his, actually I am of the opinion that we first of all, I have tried to communicate. He is quite different with that of a Pope. He is quite different with that of, that of a Jonathan Swift. They are the bitter critic. They try to criticize their character. But so far as Geoffrey Chaucer is concerned, he is the first great poet and painter of picture which he tried to communicate in his piece of literature. He does not hate his character. It is quite clear that he does not try to hate his character. He loves his character. Even then, if we try to analyze, when we say he is next to Shakespeare, why he is next to Shakespeare? It is because of the fact the character of Geoffrey Chaucer and the character of Shakespeare are trying to communicate the same ability. And on top of that, Geoffrey Chaucer tried to present 14th century vividly, clearly, crystal-like clear. He tried to portray his character not like of the Tennyson. Tennyson did in the Victorian period, but he is very mild, very gentle, very calm and quiet. In spite of the fact that he writes for the court, he writes for the elite, he writes for the feudal lord, but he does not hate that of his common character. And in this context, it's quite clear. If we analyze Geoffrey Chaucer is a product of Renaissance period. Because Renaissance is germinating in Italy. It's quite clear. His Italian taste gave him the new outlook. His long period of services with the king and the feudal lord and the feudal baron as well, have never cut him from the downtrodden, that of the poverty-stricken. He also tried to discuss, that of a downtrodden, that of the poverty-stricken. It is quite clear. So his interest, so whereas his interest of writing that of the character is very sympathetic for mankind and instinctive, try to communicate instinctive virtue under the feudal lords. He no doubt tried to communicate under feudal lord, the king, the court and the things like that, but he does not hate with his character. In this context, it's quite clear that he had an immense enthusiasm for life in this world, for the society of these fellow creatures. Some critics are of the opinion that when he writes about common man, there are the upper class, higher class, elite. Definitely he tried to communicate hatred towards, that are downtrodden, that are the poverty stricken. But if we analyze his prologue and the Canterbury he does not try to communicate any hatred with his character. In spite of the fact that they are trying to communicate, that was something negative, something passive, something pessimistic. In this context, it's quite clear that later, if we try to analyze his piece of literature, he is a liberal. He wanted to share of that umbrella to save themselves from the scorching heat. Or in other words, his basic aim, no doubt, to write for the upper class, for the landlord, for the king, and for court. But vis-a-vis, he also tried to discuss, that of his common rank characters. Now, again, I am of the opinion that if I try to compare Shakespeare, for the pleasure and amusement sake, and try to give, that of a very impressive, that of viewpoint to the reader. Chaucer, like Shakespeare and Fielding, Henry Fielding, had the keenest sense of the ludicrous and the incongruous and comical life. In this context, it's quite clear that if we analyze Geoffrey Chaucer, he had the sense of keenness and ludicrous and incongruous and the comical in life, manner and circumstances. In spite of the fact that he knows very well about the ludicrous and incongruous attitude, but he does not try to hate his character. Now, let us analyze when he tried to communicate his character. He is seldom took to bitter and savage criticism. He does not want to criticize his character. This savage try to listen, very carefully for boys and girls of literature. What happened is that this savage and savage satire, which is like a cold, biting and freezing wind, can be seen not in the sympathetic Geoffrey Chaucer, but one can see in the piece of literature of Ben Jonson, Swift and Pope, a rabid castigator. What happened is that if we analyze Geoffrey Chaucer and that of his other character, that of the writer, particularly Ben Jonson, is that clear? Ben Jonson, Swift and Pope, they are rabid castigator. They are trying to listen these words, rabid castigator. But so far as Geoffrey Chaucer is concerned, he is very mild, very cool and comfortable, in spite of the fact that he is a poet of upper class. Now, again this thing I would like to communicate once again, that Chaucer as a satirist, try to analyze this thing. Chaucer as a satirist, satire is found in the word of Chaucer, but it is always gentle, seldom savage and never savage. It is quite clear that if we analyze the piece of literature of Chaucer, he is very cold, he is very gentle and seldom biting. because he was a highly educated, and on top of that, he had a milk of humanity. He feels sympathy for, that way, lower class as well. Now, Geoffrey Chaucer, the character of Geoffrey Chaucer, particularly Parson, the pardoner, the knight, the clerk, and the knight's son, is apparently he tried to praise, but inwardly he satire. But his satire is very gentle, very kind, very nice. His humor was not tinged with fierce and biting satire. Now it's quite clear. It's quite clear. If we analyze his satire, it's never fierce and biting. Milk of humanity, milk of human being, and kindness flowed in the vein of Geoffrey Chaucer. So he does not hate and crack his characters. In spite of the fact that he was a man of court, he was a poet of court, and the Goss, a critic, remarks of all writer of genius, Chaucer is the one with whom it is easiest to have a sense of companionship, sense of comradeship. So Legos is of the opinion, if we try to analyze the piece of literature of Geoffrey Chaucer, one can find the touch of friendship, companionship, brotherhood, sympathy and tolerance. He actually, what happened is that he has loved both opposite and positive character. He has great love with just and unjust. He does not communicate any kind of hatred. And the aim of Ben Jonson, if we try to analyze the Ben Jonson, if we analyze Ben Jonson, what happened is that he tried to depict the follies of the people, and he tried to satire the people. But Pope was another bitter satirist, no doubt. Pope was also another bitter satirist, who was like a rag bull. Pope Alexander Pope was a rag bull, from whom people sought escape. He's a rag bull, people want to him escape from him. Pope was proud of his satire. Now, if we analyze Alexander Pope, he was satire to his, he was very much proud to his satire. And he once said, what he said, I quote, "Yes, I am proud," said Alexander Pope. "I must be proud of, man not afraid of God." He is of the opinion that man should not try to afraid of God, but afraid of me. So he was very much proud of the state of fear. But Chaucer, if we analyze Geoffrey Chaucer, was not a rabid castigator. It's quite clear. Geoffrey Chaucer was not a rabid castigator of the evil that were running rampant every nook and corner. He was not a rabid castigator, which is running every nook and corner of society. But so far as this person is concerned, that is Geoffrey Chaucer, he does not try to communicate this kind of things. Now let us analyze. If we analyze the prologue, is replete with Chaucerian irony. It is quite clear. If we try to analyze Geoffrey Chaucer, his prologue, which is full with Chaucerian irony, For instance, in this context, we have the description of Madame Eglantines. We have the description of Madame Eglantine. I mean, she speaks French, which was not the correct French as spoken at Paris, but the French of an English. Now, in this context, Geoffrey Chaucer is of the opinion, he tried to communicate, I mean, that of Madame Eglantine. The very function of Madame Eglantine is that she speaks as English speaks, but she could not speak as the French. So that's why he tried to communicate, I mean, that this thing. I mean, that is actually his criticism is very natural, very, I mean, that positive. Now analyze. Now, one thing is quite clear. Chaucer's irony is crystal clear when he says that the liar was the busiest man in England. When he says the liar was the busiest man in England, then he was. Chaucer's remarks about the doctor of physics are ironical. You know, when he says the liar who was the busiest man in England, and he tried to communicate very positively, not negatively. Now again, one thing is quite clear. If we try to analyze, I mean, that is irony. Irony is visible. Irony is visible in the married wife of Bath. You know, wife of Bath. She tried to be happy, married with 5 husbands, and now she is prepared to marry the 6th one. She wants to enjoy the 6th one. So his criticism is very mild, very soft. He does not want to hate his character. Now, one thing is quite clear. In spite of sympathy for the downtrodden and the poverty-stricken and the common people, Chaucer wrote for the court nobility and cultivated class. Again, I am of the opinion that Chaucer wrote for the nobility, for the refined class, for the king, for the feudal lord, and cultivated class. And it does not want to communicate the pain and groaning of that of the common people. He does not want to communicate that of this kind of things. So he does not want to communicate that of this kind of things. What happened is that he tried to love that of a common man. He does not try to hate. Now, again, it is quite clear that Chaucer wants to communicate the life of court, the life of royal dignity, the civilized human being, and things like that. Is that clear? In the 14th century, let us analyze. Aristocratic people had food in abundance. Now let us analyze. There is a lot of difference between have and have not. On the one hand, the poor are groping in the quagmire of suffocation. They are suffering from disease, they are suffering from food, they are suffering from all kind of the problems. But you cannot find out this kind of injustice in his piece of literature. And on top of that, people are dying in black death. Is that clear? And famine. In consequence, indignation should be arose, sorry. Okay? But one cannot see any kind of hatred so far as his characters are concerned. Now, the appeal for the poor fell flat upon him. No doubt there is quite injustice. There is a difference between have and have not. Because if I analyze, out of the society of that time, from dawn to dusk, people are busy to accumulate wealth. And this accumulation of wealth has given a sense of competition. And this sense of competition has made them so busy that they cannot take part in the affairs of life. So the rich people don't have love with don't and that is the poverty stricken. And if you try to analyze the piece of literature of Geoffrey Chaucer, we cannot find out any kind of distinction of have and have not. Now, it is quite clear, during this hard time, Chaucer does not want to become the champion of the poor. Because he was a poet of court, his main job is to pinpoint this thing. Now, it's quite clear if you try to analyze Canterbury Tales. In the Canterbury Tales, it is quite clear that we can see the community of English society. He tried to represent English society, the upper class. He tried to represent the society. He tried to represent wide and variegated 14th century life in Canterbury Tale. So, Canterbury Tale is a kind of a picture of his society. If you want to see, the picture of, this society, one can see in the Canterbury Tales, which he tried to depict. And what kind of thing he tried to depict? No doubt there is a black death, there is famine, there is poverty, there is difference between have and have not. But Chaucer is not trying to communicate this philosophy. He is of the opinion my basic aim is to communicate to my pupil. So he says that I do not want to hate. So far as the common man are concerned, I do not want to pinpoint the follies, the errors of these people. Now, one thing is obvious. One cannot see the peasant revolt and the lord-lad agitation. Opine, lord-lad agitation and opine. And opine, is that clear? Mode of Levert gave us glimpses of an English which Chaucer, in spite of the many-sidedness, does not want to communicate this kind of hatred. Now, again it's quite clear. Geoffrey Chaucer does not want to mix the common rank of people with that of the upper class. He does not want to mingle. Rather, he does not want to wobble. That of the downtrodden, the poverty-stricken and the upper class. He is of the opinion my main job is to communicate the upper class, the court, the justice and the feudal lord. In spite of the aloofness of Geoffrey Chaucer, from the society. In spite of aloofness from the society, Chaucer does not want to communicate any kind of thing which try to show that he want to pinpoint, he want to create problem for the society. He says, my aim is to write for the upper class. Now, again, this is one of the most essential things. In a passage from the Parson Tale, he became a Shakespearean, a voice of the masses, the milk of human kindness, the sympathy with the poor was as strongly felt by Chaucer as Shakespeare. Both Chaucer and Shakespeare did not fell flat on the character like Juvenal. So, if we analyze Geoffrey Chaucer and Shakespeare, they try to communicate their character. It doesn't try to communicate that he wants to show any kind of hatred and things like that. One thing is quite clear. That he says that so far as the rag Victorians are concerned, doubt rag Victorians are concerned, who took a pessimistic attitude. He is of the opinion so far as the rag Victorian of at that time, he does not try to communicate hatred as that of the Victorian tried to communicate. So, Geoffrey Chaucer tried to pinpoint the positive aspect of life. But if we try to analyze that of Geoffrey Chaucer, like that of the Browning, he had enough courage, faith and optimism to enjoy the world. One thing is quite clear. He want to follow the Browning, who's very much optimistic about this concern. Now let us analyze Gower and Geoffrey Chaucer. As Chaucer was the representative of the court, landlord and Gower were enthusiastic and zealous advocate of the common people. It is quite clear that if we try to analyze Geoffrey Chaucer and that of a Gower, and Gower, Geoffrey Chaucer was the poet of court, but Gower was the poet of, that of a common man, the downtrodden, that of the poverty-stricken. Now, one thing is quite clear. When we see Chaucer, a realist, in the beginning we must try to analyze one thing in your mind. Chaucer is clear. In the beginning, Chaucer was influenced on that of the French. In the French period, Chaucer was too an allegorist. But in English period, he shook off the shackle of allegory and things like that, and became the English. So that's why Chaucer is a realist, because what he sees in his piece of literature tries to communicate in his Amin Baig character.